Good morning, class. Today we're going to learn how to make biscuits and gravy. We're going to start with the biscuits. While they're baking, we're going to make the gravy. So the first thing we're going to do is add our dry ingredients into the food processor. I'm using a food processor. This can also be done by hand. Just find that the food processor is easier. So I'm going to take and add the flour. Our dry ingredients are flour, baking powder, which helps the biscuits to rise, and a little bit of salt. So I'm going to start with the flour. So when we add flour, I want to fluff it up a little bit so it's not packed in. And then we're going to scoop it into our dry measuring cups. Need to be leveled off, so we're going to tap it just a little bit to get some of the air out, and then we're going to level it off. There's 1 cup. So that is 2 cups, and then we need a 1/2 cup. So to get the 1/2 cup, we have to find our dry measuring cup that says 1/2 cup on it. It's called a 1/2 cup because it's 1/2 of the full cup. Heat my flour up because I'm going to use it to flour the board when we make the biscuits. So I need 2 tablespoons of baking powder. Tablespoon, sprinkle it around. And 2 tablespoons. I need a teaspoon of salt. So I take my measuring spoon and level off 1 teaspoon of salt. Put it on, snap it into place, and we're going to use the pulse. If you didn't have a food processor, you just use a spoon and stir it in very well. Okay, and then we need to add our butter. So butter needs to be very cold so it doesn't melt into the mixture. You want little crumbles of butter in the biscuit itself. So when it bakes, the butter kind of melts while it's baking. That gives it the good texture that you want in the biscuit. What I did is I took the cube of butter, I cut it into little squares, and then I put it back in the refrigerator to chill. And I'm gonna just put this into the food processor, and we're gonna pulse it until it crumbles. So we don't want to hold it down. We want to pulse it a little bit at a time. So each little time we cut the butter, get it coated with a little flour. If you're using a bowl and doing this by hand, you could either use some type of butter pastry cutter, or you could even take a couple of knives and kind of cut it in, mix, cut it, mix, until you get the same effect. So I'm going to give it a couple more pulses, and that's about it. Then I'm going to take this mixture and I'm going to pour it into a bowl. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a well on the top. Kind of like a little hole. I'm going to push it to the sides. And I'm going to add buttermilk, and I'm going to add the honey, so the wet ingredients. So this is the buttermilk found in any grocery store. And the buttermilk is the milk that you get when you're forming butter from the milk, which is separating out the milk fat. The milk fat becomes butter. The liquid that comes off of it is buttermilk. So we're gonna pour this 1 cup, and I'm using a liquid measuring cup. If I tried to put it in a dry measuring cup, it would spill. So this has, I measure it to this line. It is self-leveling. Pour it into the well. So I need to put in honey, and I need to measure it. But honey's sticky, so it's going to stick to this, and it's not going to give me a very accurate measure. So I'm going to spray the spoon with a little bit of cooking spray. And then I'm going to pour the honey in until it's just about level. And drizzle that on top so it comes right out because of the cooking spray. There's a little more spray for the 2nd teaspoon. That's in. I need to mix everything up. So it's going to be very sticky. So I'm going to get a spoon and just kind of fold it all in together, the wet and the dry ingredients. I don't want to over fold it because I want a good texture to my biscuits, and good texture comes from not overworking the dough. So when I fold, I just use a kind of a folding over just to kind of combine it together, not really a stirring motion. And I don't need a perfectly smooth dough. It can have little clumps like this. So just kind of mixing it in a little bit. Pick it up and kind of fold it from the bottom because the dry ingredients end up in the bottom. Sprinkle a little flour onto my board. And then I'm just going to dump this. So this is dumped onto the cutting board. Definitely not like a pie dough, and I'm just going to form it a little bit. And I want it 3/4 of an inch thick. So I have this kitchen tool that I use. That's 3/4 of an inch thick. So just about like so. We're going to make it into kind of a rectangle shape. Very last time. Over. And this will help the biscuits to kind of fall apart as you're and be flaky, but you want in a biscuit. So 3/4 of an inch thick. So this little tool is, I use it in coffee. It's to help the filter to pour coffee and make espresso drinks. It's known as a dosing ring, but it happens to measure exactly 3/4, so I found it in the kitchen to show you what 3/4 of an inch is thick. About a 3-inch mold. So you don't want to be twisting these, so that will, you just want to press straight down. So you could use a glass if you didn't have one of these. All right, so then we need to put these on a baking sheet. We're going to put them close together and so they don't dry out, and then we are going to bake them at 475 degrees for about 15 minutes. So I need to wait till the oven is all the way at 475 before I put them in the oven. So I have my biscuits on the tray. Notice they're touching each other. They can go just straight on the tray. They have enough butter to keep them from sticking. So I'm going to, so when the butter melts, it will act like a grease to keep them from sticking to the tray. So I have a pastry brush, a little bit of, it says 2 tablespoons, so I'm just kind of guess on this one. I'm just going to put a little bit brushed on top. So perfect timing. I just finished cleaning up the kitchen, and the buzzer went off to let me know my temperature of my oven is 475 degrees. So I'm going to take my biscuits and I'm going to set them in the oven. Set a timer for 15 minutes. And let's start on the gravy. So I've heated up my pan, and then I'm just going to take my sausage and I'm going to add the sausage to the pan, and we're going to cook it until it browns. We got to make sure it's cooked all the way though. So I have my pan here. I have it over about a medium-high heat, not all the way up, and a little past medium. And as it's cooking and browning, I'm just kind of breaking it up with my spoon. Use this saucepan, so I'm going to transfer the meat when it's cooked into here, and I'm going to use that to make my gravy. So my meat looks brown, but I'm going to let it cook just a little bit more, because if I look a little bit, I can see a little pink in there. So I just want to make sure that there's absolutely no pink. So it won't hurt to cook it a little bit longer. So to be on the food safety side, I want to make sure it's thoroughly cooked. So now I need to transfer the cooked meat into the pan. So the way I'm going to do this is I got a big enough pot so that I'm just going to pour it over the side. And then I have a little bit that I scrape. Just pour that into the pan. Then I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of butter. I'm going to turn the temperature down to medium. So I'm gonna let the butter melt all the way inside the pan. I'm gonna mix in my flour. So I'm gonna let the flour cook. That's gonna thicken the gravy. Kind of brown it inside the pan. But flour does not have much flavor, but it is used to thicken. So the way to get it flavor is to make sure it gets mixed in with the meat. So milk. And my biscuits are done. Just checked them. And here's the biscuits. So I'm gonna set those. So I just add a little bit. It'll start to thicken. See, it's thick. And just a little bit more milk at a time. So just add our milk in. Let that cook. Add a little bit more. My seasonings, I'm gonna add a half a teaspoon salt, just a little bit. Sausage. So I'm gonna add, see how I like it. I'm gonna add 1 teaspoon and then we're gonna toast it. Well, 1 teaspoon should do it. So for the seasonings, I've added a half a teaspoon of salt and 1 teaspoon of black pepper. And as it cooks, it starts to thicken and make our gravy. As I can feel it thickening as it starts to heat up. Okay. Then I'm gonna let it set for a little bit off the heat. And let it cool just a little bit. So I take my biscuit, just kind of pull it apart a little bit. That's why we folded it, so it kind of just like fall apart. We didn't want it. Then I'm going to take my ladle and just add a little bit of gravy to the top, and then have it, biscuits and gravy.